In this video, we'll discover how does carb cycling help with weight loss. Carb cycling can help with weight loss by maximizing how the body uses fuel. When you adopt this diet, you eat fewer carbs for 2 days, then have a day of eating more carbs. How you alternate between high and low carb days varies depending on how much activity you're doing. You benefit from the carb fuel you'll get on the days when you're working out. Meanwhile, you benefit from low carbs if you're not active. As you work out, the body dips into carbohydrate stores to find energy. This means you should align high carb days with training days. This means your body can use the fuel to its best advantage. It also means that the additional energy allows you to work out for longer. You'll therefore burn more calories as a result. On rest days, carbs can be scaled back. This will reduce the number of empty calories you consume and help you lose weight. Imagine your weight is 175 pounds. You could aim to have 2 grams of carbs for every pound of your weight on a high carb day. That would be around 350 grams. On low carb days, you could reduce this to around 1 gram per pound of your weight. This would take your carb intake down to 175 grams. That doesn't mean there's a set amount of carbs you can eat on each type of day. Largely, it depends on what workout you're doing. It also depends on how frequently you're working out. You'll find plenty of advice online. However, you'll need to tailor your carbohydrate intake to your own needs. Your metabolism will decrease or increase depending on your macronutrient and calorie intake. If you eat enough carbs at the correct time, your metabolism is reset. This triggers your body to release leptin and thyroid. These are the hormones which regulate your body weight. The standard American diet is very heavy in carbs. This can produce a negative effect, stimulating the release of insulin too often. As a result, weight gain can occur and conditions like diabetes can develop. Low-carb days encourage your body to use all its glycogen, stored carbs. It switches to burning ketones, body fat, as fuel. When stored fat is burned, weight is naturally lost. Every carb cycling diet plan is different. You need to choose the one that meets your own goals. A standard plan will keep your carb intake very low for 2 to 3 days. It will then increase your carb intake for a day. That day should involve some intense activity. On a low-carb take, your carbohydrate intake should be around 50 grams to 150 grams. It should come from dairy and non-starchy vegetables. On a high-carb day, you can have around 400 grams of carbs. These can come from starchy carbs, fruit and whole grains, as well as dairy and non-starchy vegetables. Carb cycling's primary benefit is rapid weight loss. However, there are some other benefits offered by this way of eating that other diets don't provide. When you cycle between high and low carb days, you reap the benefits offered by both forms of dieting. Even better, many of the negatives of those diets are eliminated. Some of the benefits of carb cycling include improved insulin sensitivity. This helps to reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. It can also improve cholesterol levels and enhance metabolic health. Anyone who is pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, or who has type 2 diabetes already can benefit from this way of eating. Also, those who are resistant to weight loss may benefit from this regime. By decreasing carb intake, insulin release is also reduced. This allows the body to burn rapidly through carbohydrate stores, switching to burning fat for energy instead. As a result, faster weight loss can be triggered. During the higher carb refeeding period, hormones can enjoy positive effects. Thyroid hormones, leptin, and testosterone can all reap a positive impact. All these factors have a key role to playing in dieting success over the long term. Hormones play a vital part in exercise performance, metabolism, and hunger management. Therefore, controlling them more efficiently will ensure better function. Carb cycling isn't an effort-free way of eating. Many people embark on this regime without realizing how much work is involved. Planning is key to your success. You need to measure, count grams, and weigh in order to succeed. There are apps out there such as MyFitnessPal which can make life easier. However, if you want a regime that is all planned out for you, carb cycling isn't for you. On the other hand, if rules and guidelines are your preferred option, carb cycling is a great choice. Are you thinking about giving it a try? Then read on to find out what you must remember about this way of eating. Get it right for you. Your first step is to make sure you get your carb cycling regime right for you as an individual. Everyone has different carb intake needs. That means there's no single one-size-fits-all solution. You'll need to work out your own unique daily calorie goal for each day. This can be a challenge. One general approach to take is, want to lose weight? Multiply your weight by 10. This is the number of calories you should aim to consume each day. Want to maintain your existing weight? Multiply your weight by 12. This is the number of calories you'll need to eat daily. Want to gain weight? Multiply your weight by 15. This is how many calories you'll need to eat daily. Once you know the number of calories to aim for, it's time to move on to the next step. You need to divide up those calories amongst the three main macronutrients: fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Protein and carbs both supply 4 calories per gram. Fat provides 9 calories per gram. As well as carb cycling, you should aim for around 1 gram of protein for each pound of your weight. The rest should be made up of healthy fats. On a high carb day, you'll increase the number of carbs you eat. You'll also increase your calorie intake. The fats and protein levels will remain the same. On low carb days, you'll reduce your calorie intake. Again, your fat and protein levels will remain the same. Essentially, carb cycling is about reducing your calorie intake, but not feeling as if you are. It's important to remember that if you keep your carbs too low for several days, you can experience ill effects. Carb cravings, fatigue, sleep problems, bloating, irritability, moodiness, and constipation can all occur as a result. This happens because your body has used up all its available carbohydrates and is switching to using fat as fuel. It's a phenomenon known as carb flu. It is temporary, but if you maintain your hydration level and consume enough electrolytes, it'll pass quickly. Not everyone can cope with carb cycling regimes, though. For some people, it's a counterproductive way to eat. People suffering from Hashimoto's disease or who have adrenal fatigue can find their thyroid hormone production is reduced. This can slow down their metabolic rate and cause weight gain. People who are breastfeeding, pregnant, have a history of eating disorders, or who are already underweight should avoid this regime. Calories and protein. When you're carb cycling, it can be tempting to eradicate lots of things from your diet. It's important to remember that it's only refined carbs that need to be slashed. When you're eating fewer carbs, you need to ensure that fiber remains a key part of your diet. A low-carb day isn't a reason to forget apples or broccoli. Primarily, focus on taking out simple carbs and sugar from your diet. Bagels and muffins can go. Nutrient-rich, fiber-filled foods like quinoa, oats, beans, fruits, and vegetables should all stay. If you prioritize high-fiber carbohydrates on your low-carb days, you'll feel more full. Your cholesterol levels will be better controlled, and your microbiome will be healthier. This will help you to manage your weight effectively since you won't be tempted to binge. Inflammation will also be reduced, helping to combat obesity. You may think you can lose more weight if you reduce your calorie intake significantly. However, you still need to eat enough. Even on a low-carb day, you need to maintain appropriate calorie intake. The brain requires carbohydrates to function. Specifically, it requires glucose to run effectively. If there's no glucose for it to use, the body must use another source. It may end up using protein for this purpose. This is bad news when you want to maintain and build up lean muscle. You must, therefore, eat over 130 grams of carbs even on a low-carb day. The brain needs to be fed so you don't spend the whole day walking around in a fog. Remember, the quality of the food you eat matters just as much as the amount. Your high carbohydrate days mustn't be filled with fries and pizza. You should enjoy whole grains instead. Whole grain pasta and bread and brown rice are much healthier options than refined sugars. If you aren't sure what you should be eating, you should talk to an expert. The amount of carbs that you'll need will vary depending on your makeup. It will vary depending on your calorific needs, your activity level, and the type of exercise you do. It's also very depending on your height, weight, and gender. A dietitian can help give you a personalized recommendation. This will ensure you're able to get the right amount of fuel you require to maximize your results. Carb cycling represents an approach to dieting in which carb intake is alternated. There are no hard and fast rules about the basis on which you do this. Some people alternate daily, while others alternate on a monthly or weekly basis. Some people do long periods of high, moderate, and low-carb diets. Others vary their approach on a day-to-day basis. This means that there is no single type of carb cycling to suit everyone. Everyone should program their carb intake. They can do this to suit a range of factors. These include your own body composition goals, your rest days and training days, your scheduled refeeds, whether you're attending a competition or special event, the type of training you're undertaking and its intensity, your body fat level. Some carb cycling approaches involve 2 days of low carbs followed by a day of high carbs. This pattern repeats. Another approach is to have 2 days of high carb intake followed by 2 days of moderate carbs. There will then be 3 days of low carbs before returning to the beginning of the cycle. Usually, the protein intake will remain similar between all days. Fat intake, meanwhile, will vary depending on the intake of carbohydrates. High carbohydrate days usually mean low fat. Low carb days mean high fat. Another approach involves adjusting your carb intake week on week. For example, you may eat a low carb diet for 11 days in a row. You may then have high carb days for the following 3 days before returning to the beginning of the cycle. There is even a monthly adjustment approach. This involves eating low carbs for 4 weeks and then having a week of high carbs for the 5th week. As you can see, there are many variations of carb cycling. That means some individual experimentation and trial and error will be required. Over time, you'll eventually find the right formula to suit you. A quick overview of some of the most common carb cycling approaches is as follows. An infrequent, large refeed. This involves increasing carb intake every 1 to 2 weeks during a low carb intake phase. Moderate frequent refeeds. This involves increasing carb intake every 3 to 4 days in a low carb intake phase. Strategic carb cycling. This involves structuring menus in a moderate carb intake at specific strategic intervals in a low carb intake phase. When you follow this approach, you'll steer away from a very high carb intake. It will therefore allow your metabolism to catch up to your dietary intake. Carb cycling to gain muscle. Anyone who wants to gain muscle mass will require a calorie surplus. However, when you overconsume calories in the long term, body fat gain is almost inevitable. Carb cycling allows muscle gain to be optimized over fat gain. Like strategic carb cycling, menus must be planned to match your weekly schedule. This will enable you to make temporary surplus of calories to boost strength and lean mass gains. Before embarking on a carb cycling regime, you need to know more about what carbs are. You also need to know which ones are suitable to eat on this type of diet. Carbohydrates often have negative connotations. However, not all carbs are bad for you. Carbohydrates are essential in supplying energy. Here, we take a closer look at which ones you should be enjoying as part of your carb cycling lifestyle. What are good carbs? Alongside fats and proteins, carbs are one of the 3 main macronutrients. Carbs are needed to supply energy to the brain and body. Whenever you eat carbs, they're broken down during digestion into sugars. These sugars are then absorbed into the bloodstream. In response to the boost in blood sugar levels, the body releases insulin. It is needed to shuttle the sugar, called glucose at this stage, to the cells. This allows a quick energy boost to fuel activity. Carbohydrates also get stored in the liver and muscles as glycogen. This is a stored type of glucose. However, excess glucose also gets stored as fat. Therefore, lots of people think that carbohydrates are bad for them. Not all carbohydrates are equal. There are 3 primary types of carbohydrates: fiber, starch, and sugar. Sugar is by far the simplest type. Fiber and starch are both complex carbohydrates. This means they are more difficult to break down in the body. It takes longer, and therefore you'll feel full for longer when you eat complex carbs. Processed or refined carbohydrates are less fibrous and starchy. They are more sugary and have less nutritional value. Processed carbs can be ditched from your diet when you're carb cycling. However, whole foods that are rich in carbs should stay in your diet. Potatoes and starchy vegetables such as carrots and squash are complex carbohydrates, which are good for you. Whole grains such as brown rice and quinoa and legumes such as lentils and beans are also good choices. Even foods containing natural sugars such as milk and fruit have a place in carb cycling diets. These whole foods have nutritional merits. They contain key minerals and vitamins. Therefore, although the word carbohydrates often produces images of sugary food that is unhealthy, this isn't always the case. Complex carbs have a vital role to play in ensuring you have a healthy lifestyle. Of course, that doesn't mean that all carbohydrates can be included in a carb cycling diet. Some should always be avoided except as occasional treats. Yet there are lots of healthy sources of carbohydrate which have lots of beneficial minerals, vitamins, and fiber. They also taste great. Therefore, when planning out a high-carb day menu, you shouldn't see it as an excuse to binge on cookies. Instead, put your focus on healthy complex carb choices. Some recommended good carbohydrates include whole grains. Unmodified grains have many health benefits. They're very healthy and include quinoa, oats, and brown rice. Vegetables. All vegetables have different mineral and vitamin content. You should eat many different colors to obtain the right balance. Unprocessed fruit. Like vegetables, all fruits are unique. Berries are especially healthy since they have a low glycemic load and a high antioxidant content. Legumes. These complex carbs are digested slowly. They are packed with minerals and fiber. Tubers. Sweet potatoes and white potatoes are also complex carbs. They are slowly digested, so you'll feel full for longer. How do you identify which carbohydrates are good ones? They will be high in fiber. unprocessed with no natural ingredients removed, slow to digest. Bad carbs, on the other hand, will be found in very processed foods, high in sugar, containing white flour, low in fiber content. What would be good examples of carbs to eat at each stage of your carb cycling plan? On a no-carb day, you should eat vegetables that are high in fiber like asparagus, leafy greens, mushrooms, and broccoli. Lean protein, good fats. You should avoid eating starchy carbs. These include oats, rice, potatoes, and cereal. They also include starchy vegetables like squash, pumpkin, zucchini, and beans. Your total intake of carbs should be under 25 grams per day. All of these should come from fiber-filled vegetables. On low-carb days, you should eat fibrous vegetables, 2 to 3 servings of starch. All should be from clean sources like sweet potatoes, brown rice, fruit, starchy vegetables, and oats. They should be free from dairy, soy, and gluten. Starchy carbs should be eaten after your workout for the best results. On high carbohydrate days, you should eat up to 200 grams of carbs for a woman or 300 grams for a man. The total amount will vary to suit your activity level and size. Lots of lean protein, plenty of healthy fats. High carbohydrate days shouldn't be an excuse for binge eating. They are a way of systematically resetting your fat-burning and muscle-building hormones. Most of the fats should come from a clean source. However, if you're going to cheat, make sure you do it on one of these high-carb days. There are misconceptions that foods like pasta are banned from carb cycling diets. This isn't strictly true. If you put any food off limits, you'll just want to binge on it more. You can have foods like pasta. However, if you're going to eat starchy foods that have little fiber and micronutrition, you'll need to eat them strategically. You should only have them after you've worked out. This is because your insulin sensitivity will be highest at that time. Your body will, therefore, be able to use them at their best at this time. They're less likely to be converted into fat in the body and stored. Good fats and proteins. On a high-carb day, your focus should remain on complex carbs. You should avoid simple carbs. Complex carbohydrates help you to stay full for longer. They all contain more nutrients and vitamins. On a no-carb day, you can't just cut out starch and sugar, though. You need to replace those missing calories which you'd usually derive from carbs with something else. Good fats are a good substitute. Of course, not all fats are good fats. Carb cycling is different from a keto diet. In the keto lifestyle, consuming all fats is encouraged. Even sources of saturated fat such as cheese and bacon can be eaten freely. On a carb cycling regime, these sources should be avoided. Good fats that are focused on omega-3 fatty acids can be eaten freely. You can find these in healthy sources such as avocados, chia seeds, fish, and olives. Experts often recommend medium-chain triglycerides, such as MCT oil, on a carb cycling regime. These stimulate your neurological functions, even on days when you're not eating carbs. As well as good fats, you should make sure to eat plenty of lean protein. Protein contains no carbohydrates. Therefore, it can be eaten freely even on a no-carb day. Eggs, lean chicken, and fish are all good choices. They will help you feel full while boosting muscle growth.